seconds. 2 seconds. I am in there and I'm fucking dead. Are we serious? Hello and welcome. Today I just want to talk to you guys about something that I've dealt with at a point in my life, and I'm sure you guys will as well. But it's people giving you advice about situations they have never lived through. It is one of the most frustrating things in the world, not because the advice is just bad normally, but because the people talking the loudest are the ones who understand the least. They haven't walked your path. They haven't carried your responsibility, and they haven't felt the pressure you're under. But they still feel qualified to tell you what you should be doing. So this video is about that. About the moments where someone tried to guide me without ever understanding where I was standing. And about how the kind of advice that can actually make things harder instead of helping. So one of the most common types of advice I've gotten comes from people who haven't really experienced much from themselves. Like, they mean well, but they speak in these vague, oversimplified phrases that don't match reality. Things like, just be confident. Just don't worry about it. Just follow your passion. These are nice ideas, don't get me wrong, but they're not real guidance. They're not actionable. They don't acknowledge the complexity of life, or the responsibilities you're juggling, or even the pressure you're under. I remember being overwhelmed with school, such as like anatomy and phys, exams, and all these deadlines, and someone who hadn't even been to school in years telling me school is easy, you're overthinking it. And in that moment, I realized something important, because people will always underestimate the weight of a burden they've never had to carry. And it's not that they're trying to dismiss your struggle. It's that they genuinely don't understand it. They're giving advice from a distance, without context, without experience, and without any real sense of what your day-to-day looks like. And when someone hasn't lived what you're living, their advice can feel disconnected. It can even make you feel like you're failing at something that's actually just really difficult. And another type of advice that I've gotten is financial advice from people who aren't dealing with the same responsibilities or circumstances. They'll say things like, just save more, or just invest, or, just buy that thing that you need. And it's really just these are just simple steps instead of a long-term goal that requires stability, time, and resources. I've had people tell me to save unrealistic percentages of my income, or act like financial growth is just a matter of willpower. But they weren't paying the bills. They're just balancing school, work, and life. And little known secret, half of them don't even work. These guys giving me life advice and financial advice in college, their moms and dads pay for most of their stuff. And it blows my mind, because personally I have to pay for everything I need, and I have to do it in a tough way, because as I'm doing this, I'm trying to make this YouTube channel pop off. And I'm flipping PCs to make extra money. And it's not doing enough always. So I work an extra job, and I have these people giving me advice without context, in incomplete consideration of me, and or my responsibilities. Their goals are way different than mine. Their stresses are way different than mine. And that all in all can change the way that you think, or the way that you want to put the best of your ability into the correct avenue because this guy said this. So some people give this advice based on their ideals of their version of life and not in the real version that you're currently living in. And that disconnect can make your words feel really, really empty. Even if they are trying to help, you don't always have to listen to them. So, one thing that I've learned is that people will give advice based on their life they wish they had, not the life they actually live. And sometimes they'll give advice based on the life you should have according to them. A lot of parents do this, which it's not a terrible thing. It's more they want you to have a better life than they had. So don't always think badly if it's a parent telling you this, but they don't really look at the reality of what you think your life is going to look like. And I've had people tell me, just take a break, without actually understanding that a break is not always an option for me. When you're balancing school, work, personal goals, and just trying to be a decent human being at the same time and have a life outside of this, everything else life throws at you, the rest isn't something that you just you decide, well, I can take a break. It's something that you have to plan around. If I need a break in life, I have to plan around this. And then there's people who tell you, slow down, even though they've never had to move at the pace that you're moving at. They don't know what it's like to juggle deadlines, responsibilities, expectations, and pressure to keep moving forward. They don't know what it feels like to be tired. But still these things that need to get done, they just don't expect that to be on your plate. It's not that their advice is always bad. I'm sure that some of them have decent advice, but it's more, it doesn't match the reality that those people are living in versus what you're living in. So half the time, they're not going to understand the responsibilities that you have to do, and it can feel like they're minimizing the effort that you're putting in. So, school for me, it was pretty tough. But school for other people in other areas can feel without context that their school is really easy, or your school seems really, really hard, or something like that. But for certain people, classes are just easier. They're just easier. Or that the studying for those classes, no matter the discipline or that stress, people just have an easier time than you sometimes. And not everyone learns the same way as you would. So taking that also into context, not everyone is going to have that same workload. Not everyone's going to have that same mental bandwidth, and not everyone is going to be dealing with the same outside pressures. So when you're taking that class, say anatomy, it's not just about memorizing information. It's about understanding systems, processes, and details that actually matter. It's demanding, it's time-consuming, and it's mentally draining. So when someone who hasn't been in school for years is talking about how class is just dumb or it's really easy and has never taken a class that you were taking, he won't ever take that in his life. You should, saying you should manage your time better or something like that. It's not because, not just that they are wrong, but they're speaking from an experience that they have no clue what your experience is. And it doesn't connect to them, and it also doesn't resonate with them, that they are just kind of speaking out of their ass. So one of the hardest types of advice to hear is kind of emotional advice. From people who haven't felt what you're feeling, they'll tell you to stop overthinking, or stop stressing, or just be happy. But as if you could just flip on and off your emotions just magically. And it's not just so easy like that, because emotions don't work like that. Stress doesn't just disappear when someone tells you it shouldn't exist. Overthinking doesn't stop when someone says it's unnecessary. And happiness isn't something you can just force onto someone. When someone hasn't experienced the same emotional weight you're carrying, their advice can feel really, really distant. It can feel like they're looking at your situation from the outside without understanding what it feels like on the inside. And sometimes the most frustrating part is that you think they're helping, but they're actually just giving you really bad advice. Like, you think they're giving you clarity, but what you really need in those moments isn't advice, it's just understanding. That's the biggest thing. And it's someone who listens instead of instructing always. Someone who acknowledges what you're feeling instead of trying to fix it for you. Something I've noticed, especially while doing this YouTube video, the biggest thing that comes up is people that give advice about like fear on themselves. And it's a way that they're trying to help you, but in the long run they're actually just protecting themselves, because they protect their fears onto you without realizing it. You'll hear things like, don't take that risk. Like, don't try and make that YouTube channel. Like, what if someone sees that? Because it most likely won't work out. Stay where it's safe. And the thing is they're not trying to hold you back. They're trying to keep you from experiencing the same fear they felt. But the problem is their fear isn't your reality. Their limits aren't your limits. I've had people tell me that certain things, because they failed at them, or because they got scared while doing them, or they didn't have the confidence to take the step, I was considering. And when someone gives you that advice on their own fear, it can sound like they're being really protective, but what they're really doing is projecting their past onto your future. It took me a long time to understand that not every warning is wisdom. Sometimes it's just someone trying to keep you from stepping into a new light. And especially like a new light that they never had courage to pursue. So like, one of the most frustrating things is when someone gives you advice before they even understand what you're dealing with. They hear one sentence and immediately jump into fix-it mode. They'll start explaining something and they cut you off with, oh, you should just do this, or I know exactly what you mean, or here's what I would do. But they don't actually know what you mean. They haven't heard the full story. They haven't asked questions. They haven't taken a moment to understand the context. And when someone gives advice without listening, it doesn't feel supportive. It feels dismissive. It feels like they're more interested in being right than being helpful. I've had conversations where I wasn't looking for advice at all. I just needed someone to hear me and to understand what I'm going through, to sit with me in that moment instead of trying to solve it. But some people don't know how to do that. They just jump straight to solutions because they're uncomfortable with emotion or silence or even vulnerability. And the result is advice that doesn't really fit the situation because it wasn't based on understanding, it was based on assumption. So there's also a different type of advice that sounds good on paper, but doesn't really match your reality. You're living in, like, it's the kind of advice that assumes you have unlimited time, unlimited energy, and unlimited resources, and also unlimited support. People will tell you to just take a break without knowing how much you have on your plate. They'll tell you just to focus on yourself without understanding the responsibilities you can't walk away from. They'll tell you to just stop stressing without knowing the pressure you're under. And the hardest part is that sometimes this advice comes from people who genuinely care about you. They'll want to help, they'll want to see you doing better, but they don't understand the full picture. They don't see the late nights, they don't see the deadlines, they don't see the expectations you're trying to meet. They don't see the internal battles you're fighting. So when you give advice that ignores your reality, or when they give you advice that ignores your reality, it can feel like they're telling you that your struggle shouldn't exist based in their mind. That you're making things harder than they need to be. That you're the problem. But you're not. You're doing the best you can with the circumstances you have. And sometimes the advice people give simply doesn't apply to the life you're living. There's another kind of advice also. It can feel heavy, and it's the advice people give based on the version of you they want to exist, not the version that actually does. Sometimes people see your potential or the parts of you that look strong from the outside, and they assume you can handle everything. They assume that you're okay, and then they assume that you're built for pressure. And because of that, they give advice that doesn't consider the limits of your humanity. You hear things like, "You'll figure it out, you always do. You're strong, you can handle it. You're smart, you'll be fine." And while those words sound supportive, they can also feel isolating because they're not acknowledging the reality that even strong people get tired. Even capable people get overwhelmed. Even the most put together people have moments where they don't know what to do. When someone gives you advice based on the version of you they've created in their head, it can make you feel like you're not allowed to struggle, like you're not allowed to be confused, like you're not allowed to be human. And that's a kind of quiet of pressure that people they don't talk enough about. So one more of the hardest things is when someone gives you advice that completely ignores the effort you're already putting in. They'll tell you to work harder, or be more disciplined, or try something different without realizing you've already been doing everything you can. They don't see the late nights, they don't see the stress, they don't see the sacrifice. They don't see the moments where you push through even when you're exhausted. And because they don't see it, their advice can feel like judgment instead of support. I've had people tell me to manage my time better when I've already squeezed every minute out of my day. I've had people tell me to stop worrying when I carry responsibilities that they didn't even know about. And I've had people tell me to just relax when relaxing isn't always just an option. And it made me realize something important. People will always underestimate the effort they don't witness. It's not personal, it's just they're giving advice from the outside looking in. They do not see the full picture, so their advice only covers the surface. There comes a point where you start to understand that not all advice is meant for you. And it's not just because they're wrong, because there is some good advice out there. There's plenty of good advice. I mean, you don't really have to listen to me, but I think I give some decent advice. But it's kind of because it wasn't built for, like, most of the advice they give, it's because it wasn't built for your life, or your circumstances, or your journey. Some advice is meant for people with different responsibilities. Some advice is meant for people with different goals. Some advice is meant for people with different struggles than you. And some advice is meant for people who they aren't you. And that's okay. You don't have to take every piece of advice that comes your way. You don't have to internalize every opinion. You don't have to adjust your life to fit someone else's perspective. You're allowed to filter, you're allowed to ask questions, You're allowed to say that I don't think that one applies to me. You're allowed to trust in your own experiences and figure out whether or not this is good advice for you. So here's what we've learned, class, okay? After years of hearing advice from people who have never stepped foot in my shoes, you are the only one who truly understands the life you're living. You're the one who knows your responsibilities, your limits, your goals, your stress, your dreams, and your reality. Advice can be helpful, it can be supportive, and it can be meaningful, but only when it comes from a place of understanding and not assumption. So take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and remember what your path is, because no one else has lived it. No one else has carried it. No one else has earned the perspective that you have in your own life. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is trust yourself more than the noise around you. So, I just want to say thanks for listening, guys. And if you ever feel misunderstood or overwhelmed or judged by advice that didn't fit your life, you're not alone. You're doing the best you can, and that's enough. So, I wanted to say thank you guys for watching the videos. If you don't know, I actually live stream these video games, so that opening was from a live stream. If you ever do want to check it out, I will leave it in the description. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.